Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Prime Life. Now, we are thrilled to have Ronald Abvajee, who is a wellness expert, joining us to discuss the growing concern of toxic leadership in businesses and the detrimental effects that it can have on an employee's well-being and productivity. Now, with his years of experience in the wellness industry and a deep understanding of organizational behavior, Ronald is uniquely positioned to offer valuable insight on this pressing issue. Assalamu alaikum, Ronald. Welcome to Prime Life.
Wa alaikum salam. Great to be with you.
Jazakallah so much. Today's topic is very, very important to have, and I think it's something that a lot of people are even scared to talk about most of the time, and we will be discussing further on why that is the case. But how prevalent do you believe that toxic leadership is in South African business space?
I don't think it's about what I believe. I believe it's what the data tells us. So one is, we know that a Gallup survey indicated that 70% of employees are disengaged within workplaces because of toxic workplaces.
70%.
70%. We then look at another study which was done by the World Economic Forum that in 2022 that looked at workplace cultures, and South Africa was rated amongst the highest when it comes to workplace toxicity, which includes fear-based leadership, micromanagement, leading to disengagement of employees and ultimately high stress levels and then burnout.
That's actually very scary. Those are very high stats. But what signs can employees look out for in leadership or in leaders for them to be able to identify, now this is a toxic leader?
This is a tricky one.
Yes.
Because often is that if you're delivering on your mandate and your accountabilities, you might look at it differently from behaviors in a leader. But if you are not delivering or achieving your KPIs or your OKRs, which are your deliverable indicators or your performance indicators, you might look at pointing a finger elsewhere for blame. Let's assume that you are delivering on all your KPIs, but you're still experiencing high stress and burnout.
Yes.
With that assumption in play, you are looking for micromanagement, you are looking for fear-based leadership and fear-based ruling leadership. Do this or else, do this if not, and it's really punitive. And you're then looking at absolute timelines that are not reasonable. If I send you an email today, I want the reply back now. And you know, when you are waking up in the morning and the first thing you want to see is, oh my goodness, did my boss or leader send me an email? I need to reply now. So when you're living in that high anxious zone of fear-based leadership, immediate response times, and ultimately, you know, cracking a whip that is absolutely unreasonable, those are some of the signs and symptoms that you look for.
I mean, where do we draw the line? Because yes, I think leaders, not I think actually, leaders also have to have a little bit of a stern hand. You need to show that you're a manager. You can't just obviously be relaxed and people are not reaching their KPIs, as you mentioned. But when do you know that this person is actually crossing a line? And when is, because even if I'm not reaching my KPIs, there still needs to be a way in which things are addressed before it easily jumps over to the other side of being toxic, you know. So when do we draw the line?
So when we look at workplaces, we know in South Africa we have SMME workplaces, and then we have, you know, larger, medium-sized businesses that are a lot more structured with policies in place to govern culture and behavior. So when you look at the larger companies with policies in place, you follow a policy. You follow a structure and the SOPs or standard operating procedures. And based on that, you are accountable to either a scorecard or a deliverable. But how you then do that as a leader, there must be a mechanism in place in those companies to, in South Africa we call it whistleblowing, but anonymized whistleblowing, either through a system or through a separate avenue, and you should be safe enough to have that within a policy and a process, without fear of being victimized by just following the process. In SMMEs, it's slightly different. SMMEs, more often than not, don't have structures, operational procedures, or policies in place to govern that culture and to govern that behavior from leaders and employees. So it's often a founder-run business, or there's a few leaders in play, and it's deliver or else. And in that environment, what I mentioned as signs and symptoms is something you should be aware of. And if there are no policies or procedures in place, yes, employees can build up a case, get evidence that there has been abuse, there has been language issues, there has been behavior issues, there has been unreasonable expectations, And you do have avenues like the CCMA, but if it's not valid based on specific experiences, then you have very little legs to stand on. And unfortunately, within that instance, you either can go a unionized route or you can go a route of trying to address it with the leader. But if you're unsuccessful with that and it's eroding your well-being, then you have to make a choice of either putting your CV out there or actually dealing with it. And that's a choice that you have to make. It's not ideal, but that's the reality that many are faced with.
Most definitely. And I think some leaders don't know that they probably have toxic leadership skills or traits, What are the most common things that leaders do that are actually signs of toxic leaderships, and how can they be addressed?
The one thing that leaders do is approach situations with employees based on what they think rather than what they know and the impact that they have on the employees. So it's deliver or else. But do employees understand the reason of why they need to deliver? Have you been clear in your expectations? I had the discussion earlier with one of my colleagues in entrepreneurship organization. They were speaking about they pulled their team together so that she could be clear on the expectations in their business. When you have clarity on expectations, any relationship becomes a lot easier to manage. So leaders, I believe, need to practice self-awareness, mindfulness, and focus on communication through clarity. Not clarity for communication, communication through clarity. And expectations then will be identified so that everyone's on the same page. And the discussion will then be I had this in my team last week, where I shared a concern with one of my colleagues, and I said, I am concerned based on X. The concern is because of Y. Help me understand, rather than, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So it's the language and the tone that we choose, and utilizing skills of coaching rather than skills of cracking a whip.
Do you think people need to be provided with training before becoming leaders?
Absolutely. That's not even in question. Because learning competency and how to do the job is not difficult. But often we promote into a leadership position, or we in a leadership position, either because we started a business out of a passion and a vision, but are we skilled enough to run the business? Are we skilled enough to run a department? And when we look at those skills, it's not just about competency, it's about the human skills. So as HL Consulting, as a business, we focus on building thriving leaders to build thriving teams. It doesn't mean you coddle. It means you are firm with accountability. You are firm with responsibility and driving accountability, but it first starts with you being accountable. And that's where I believe leadership needs to be skilled and trained, not as once off, but as a consistent cadence of driving in. In professional environments, they call it CPD, continual professional development. Hey man, we need CLD, continual leadership development, and that's where the magic will come from.
Most definitely. Now, the word burnout is something that people are using a lot these days. What are the signs that you should look out for as an individual that maybe I might be burnt out from work?
Burnout is not an flick of a switch. So burnout doesn't just happen. Burnout is a cumulative stacking of stressful situations where you are dealing with high stress levels over a period of time. In a fairly long period of time, where your mind and your body in particular, cannot cope with that anymore. So you find things like you cannot sleep, you're in a high anxious state, there's perpetual anxiety, high heart rate levels, and then you look at it to say, how does that stack into impacting my performance? I'm disassociated from work, I want to be alone, and that is not just a once-off because it was a bad day. It ends up being a bad week, a bad month, and a bad year. And ultimately, your body and your mind cannot function. You cannot be coherent in your thinking, your thoughts, to make decisions and to deliver on your work outputs. That's when you know you are in burnout, when your body says enough and begins to shut down so that you are in a survival state.
That's very interesting. Now, how can companies actually foster, a culture of psychological safety for employees without employees feeling like if I speak out or if I draw a boundary to say this is too much or I don't like that, if they are feeling safe in a sense of being able to address issues without the fear of losing their jobs, without the fear of being punished for speaking up against whatever it is that they may feel is toxic?
You know, I reflect back on that question and I think of what Google did in a project called Aristotle. And Aristotle was testing psychological safety as Google defined it, where you are safe to speak, but you are also in a safe space to hear and listen to feedback. Where you are looked at not being punitive, but look at it from a growth and an adaptability mindset. Now, you know, you get a fixed mindset, a growth mindset, but adaptability mindset means how are you adapting to those scenarios and situations internally and also externally as a collective. And Project Aristotle indicated how important psychological safety is as a culture in a workplace to build thriving teams and a thriving organization. What companies need to do when they look at culture is define it according to either the policies of governing behaviors, but define it on what do they want people to feel when they get into the organization in delivery, but also in their experience day to day. Professor Ghoshal, who passed away, spoke at the World Economic Forum about the smell of the place. And the question I have to many leaders in SMMEs or big corporates is, what's the smell of your organization when employees walk in? Does it smell and feel like hot and humid? And Professor Ghoshal referred to downtown Calcutta. Or, and were you drained and you're tired and you just, you know, you just want to get out? Or does it feel like the Fontainebleau forest in France, where you want to spring, hop and jump? Either way, you still have to deliver, but the smell of the place is different, and that's the essence of culture. And psychological safety is one where leaders are willing to listen before wanting to be heard, but where you push this culture of high performance with care.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was a very interesting thought or food for thought that you just planted in everybody's minds. But while we're still on that, I believe we do have a clip that we need to just have a look at on the importance of you know, identifying toxic leadership and how we can go about fixing that. So let's take a look.
I think the difficulty is, and it's not just South Africa, let's just put it out there, it's global. But if you look at toxic leadership and burnout, it is because we are pushing our leaders to the extent that goes beyond human capability. But at the same time, we've pushed our leaders to be leaders that weren't ready to be leaders. So we have an amazing IT expert that has done amazing things in our organization, and to reward him, we push him into a role, or her a role, that now needs to manage people, and they don't like that, or they don't necessarily have the skills for that, and that puts a lot of extra burden on them that might not have been there. So there's two sides. They push themselves because they have the inherent drive to do the best that they can do, and that would be pushing themselves towards burnout. But we add to that by putting them in roles that might not be what they want, and we don't give them the support. So the support would be training, coaching, mentoring, just so that we can actually retain the talent that they showed in the first place. At the same time, support could be the resources. So in South Africa in particular, maybe the burnout or the added burnout is because we have to do more with less. We don't have sometimes the skills, we don't have the equipment to deal with it, we don't have the people to deal with it. So you want to get so much out. The goals are great, the strategy is great, but the resources is actually not there.
Interesting clip to watch. And just on that note, before we let you go, unfortunately we did run out of time. I just wish we had more time, because I think this is such an interesting topic to cover. But in your opinions, do you think toxic leaders can change? If yes, are there any intervention strategies that have been shown to be effective?
If toxic leaders are coachable and accountable, it can change. Neuroscience has shown us that behavior can change when we become self-aware and when we focus on feedback. And this is why SMMEs have the opportunity through feedback loops and assessment loops and leadership feedback loops, and we align them, and leaders are willing to be coached. But coaching needs to be on a consistent cadence. Yes, we can change toxic workplaces, by changing what leaders utilize as a power dynamic in driving a shared power so that we can all feel like we're part of the Springboks, but held with accountability like the leader that Rassie Erasmus is.
I mean, Ronald, jazakallah so much for joining us and just for sharing with us, just insights, education on this important topic.
Always a pleasure.
Viewers at home, that was Ronald Abvajee, wellness expert, and he was just sharing with us how toxic leadership behaviors can actually lead to burnout. But without wasting any time, let's go to a break. We'll see you right after this.